So no more pork sandwiches. Well, they're Jews, so they're not going to eat that anyways. But one of the things that we see here is that they already had it kind of bad. But now it's going to grow to even worse under a violent king. And this is a guy, King Nebuchadnezzar was not a nice guy. When he came into Judah, the first thing he did was he killed most of the royal family and he gouged out the eyes of the king. That's the man that these three men are going to have to stand up to. That's not a very fun thing to think about. But these three men, knowing the history, even their personal effect by this king, they're going to say, I'm going to stand up for God. So what is their problem? Their problem is going to be seen here. And it's a great problem. We understand every day we're going to have problems where our faith is going to be tested. But in those problems, we have an opportunity to grow. Let's read Daniel, the 3rd chapter, verse 1 through 7. It says, King Nebuchadnezzar made an image of gold 90 feet high and 90 feet wide, and set it up on the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. He then summoned the satraps, prefects, governors, advisors, treasurers, judges, and magistrates, and all the provincial officials to come to the dedication of the image he had set up. So the satraps, prefects, governors, advisors, treasurers, judges, magistrates, and all the provincial officials assembled for the dedication of the image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up, and they stood before it. Then the herald loudly proclaimed, This is what you are commanded to do, O peoples, nations, and men of every language. As soon as you hear the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipes, and all kinds of music, you must fall down and worship the image of gold that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Whoever does not fall down and worship will be immediately thrown into a blazing furnace. Therefore, as soon as they heard the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, and all kinds of music, all the peoples, nations, and men of every language fell down and worshipped the image of gold that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Is that quite a problem? Here we have this violent, proud king sets up an image, probably of himself, in gold, 90 feet wide, 90 feet high. This is a monument. And he's saying, when anytime you play this music, you are to turn in the direction of that image and you are to worship. He's actually saying, you worship me. This is my great work. This is my great kingdom. This was my great conquering. You worship me. This was a huge problem. And guess what the penalty was for not obeying? Death. That's not just a slap on the hand. That's not just a fine. That's saying, you don't do what I say. Death. Not very good. Now, we may not have a problem like that yet, but we are confronted all the time with problems. All the time we are challenged and say, do you really believe in Jesus to the point that you're willing to lay down your life? You know, one of the things that we understand as Christians is, in our society, how are Christians viewed? Hypocritical, intolerant, ignorant, offensive, and so forth. Bigots. And you know what? It's sometimes easy to shut down, intimidated, and so forth. Because as Christians, we're humans. We all want to be liked. We all want to be approved of. We all want to be accepted. And sometimes standing up for God is not the easiest thing. That's why when problems arise, sometimes it's easier to run from problems or to be indifferent or pretend they don't even exist. But in each problem, you have a choice of who you're following. Are you bowing down to God or are you bowing down to man? The world is always going to test us. Satan in this world is going to try to cause us to not bow down and worship God. You see, here's always two issues with problems. And Satan knows this. Satan knows that problems can often discourage followers of God to lay down instead of stand up. That's why it takes a little pain, a little persecution, a little sacrifice, a little insult, a little avoidance, and guess what? Most people will probably leave. That's why even when Jesus is teaching in John the 6th chapter, and he teaches some hard lessons, all the crowd leaves him. The thousands of people abandon him. He only turns to his 12 and says, are you going to leave too? Because it's hard to follow God. And Satan knows that. Just a little bit of persecution and hardship and sacrifice doesn't take much. But here's this thing that Satan also fears. He knows that when Christians stand up to problems with the power of Jesus Christ, saying, I will not bow down to anyone or anything other than the one true God, that's when faith accelerates and grows and matures. And he knows that. So even though problems can cause people to shirk down in faith, they're also sometimes our greatest opportunities to glorify God and grow in our faith. And this is exactly what we're going to learn from these three men. That the one thing that they thought they were going to destroy their faith, proclaim the gods of Nebuchadnezzar, the God of Israel, the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego is going to be exalted. But it all began with a problem, a time of testing, a challenge. But the second part of spiritual growth in these times is perseverance. We're going to have a lot of P words, so get used to it. Perseverance. Because it's in perseverance that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they hear this command. They could easily recant their faith and say, okay, we're just going to bow down. We'll secretly pray to God in our rooms. But in reality, when we hear that, we're going to just bow down. But they don't do that. They don't do that. And in fact, what they decide to do is that they're going to stand up. They're going to rise up for God. And they're going to make known their level of dedication. They know that the punishment is death. And their words, as we'll see, is saying, okay, you kill us then. You throw us in. God's going to save us, but even if he doesn't, we're still not going to do what you say. Do you know how much perseverance and dedication that would take? And the amazing thing about this perseverance is that they have so much faith in God. The reason and the basis for their standing up in faith is their trust in God. But even if God doesn't save them in the way that they want, even if God's will for them was to die, they say, you know what, we love God so much, we're just going to die. We don't care. They truly show what it means to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, as John read so well. That's absolutely right. And it comes when perseverance comes. When testing comes, are you weak or are you strong? But this is where we see. Let's read verses 8 through 23. It says, at this time, astrologers came forward and denounced the Jews. They said to King Nebuchadnezzar, O king, live forever. You have issued a decree, O king, that everyone who hears the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipes, and all kinds of music must fall down and worship the image of gold. That whoever does not fall down and worship will be thrown into the blazing furnace. But there are some Jews whom you have set over affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who pay no attention to you, O king. They neither serve your gods nor worship the image of gold you have set up. Furious with rage, Nebuchadnezzar summoned Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So these men were brought before the king, and Nebuchadnezzar said to them, is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you are not to serve my gods or worship the image of gold I have set up? Now, when you hear the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipes, and all kinds of music, if you are not ready to fall down and worship the image I made, very good. But if you do, very good. But if you do not worship it, you will be thrown immediately into a blazing furnace. Then what God will be able to rescue you from my hand? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied to the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you in this matter. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to save us from it, and he will rescue us from your hand, O king. But even if he does not, we want you to know, O king, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold you have set up. Then Nebuchadnezzar was furious with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and his attitude toward them changed. He ordered the furnace heated 7 times hotter than usual, and commanded some of the strongest soldiers in his army to tie up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and throw them into the blazing furnace. So these men, wearing the robes, trousers, turbans, and other clothes, were bound and thrown into the blazing furnace. The king's command was so urgent, and the furnace so hot that the flames of fire killed the soldiers who took Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and these 3 men, and firmly tied up and fell into the blazing furnace. Here we see Nebuchadnezzar, he gets angry and says, well, what God is going to save you? And Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego say, you know what? Our God is going to save us from your hand, O king. And you know what? He's going to save us. But if he doesn't, we're still not going to bow down and worship. Can you imagine having that courageous faith in action? That is amazing. This is a guy who's known for violence, gouging out eyes, putting people to slavery. But here they say, you know what? You can do your worst. Do your worst. We still won't bow down. That's what it shows to have perseverance. You know, as Christians, we all have a level that we know that we'll stand up to God for. We'll serve God up until this point, but once it gets to that point, oh, don't ask me to do that anymore. But you know what? As we grow in our faith,